Husband threw out his sick wife after she spent her last savings on treatment, unaware of her $100 million inheritance. He threw her out just after she spent her last savings on treatment, unaware of the $100 million inheritance written in her late uncle's will, and unaware that the mistress he clung to would one day kneel beneath her shadow. You're nothing but sickness and debt. You've drained me dry, Sarah. Don't ever step foot in this house again. You're worthless, a burden I've finally cast off. Those were the cruel words Michael spat while Rebecca, once Sarah's colleague, smiled smugly at his side. Instead of holding her hand in weakness, he shoved her to the whispers of neighbors. Instead of compassion, he gave her humiliation in the moment she needed him most. He thought he had erased her forever. But what he never imagined was that the very woman he discarded in disgrace would rise with a strength no betrayal could break. Her dignity forged in suffering, her resilience crowned with an inheritance that would silence every voice that mocked her. Sometimes the ones you cast aside become the shadows you can never escape. Sometimes the wife you thought was dying becomes the one living a destiny far beyond your reach. This is not just another story of betrayal. It is the scar of humiliation, the echo of injustice, and the triumph of a heart too strong to be broken. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. As we step into this story, I ask with sincerity, if you watch without subscribing, it's like letting her voice fade again into silence. But when you click that button, you stand with every woman betrayed and every truth that must be heard. Please subscribe now. And in the comments, share where you're watching from. Let Sarah know she's not alone. Sarah clutched her thin wallet so tightly her knuckles turned white. The hospital cashier's voice echoed like a hammer. Final bill, $1,480. Payment is due now. Her heart pounded. This was it. Every last dollar she had saved over the years, every coin meant for groceries, rent, and survival, was swallowed up by the treatment that kept her alive. With trembling hands, she slid the envelope of cash forward, whispering, "Please, this is everything." The nurse at the desk glanced at her pale face. "Are you sure, ma'am? You'll be left with nothing." Sarah forced a weak smile. "Life is more important than money." But as she staggered out of the hospital that afternoon, clutching her discharge papers, reality struck her harder than any illness. She had given everything. Her body was weak, but her soul was breaking under the weight of sacrifice. Back at home, Michael sat on the couch with his feet propped on the table, scrolling through his phone. He didn't rise to greet her. Instead, he glanced at the bag of medicines in her hand and muttered, "You wasted all the savings again, didn't you? On yourself." Those words cut sharper than a knife. She wanted to remind him she had once run their small household with discipline and care, working late shifts to keep food on the table. But she swallowed her reply, only whispering, "I'm alive because of it." Michael scoffed. "Alive but broke. What kind of wife drains her husband dry? Do you even think about me?" Before Sarah could answer, another voice slipped into the room. Rebecca. She was Michael's former colleague. Young, polished, always appearing at the wrong times. She had stopped by carrying files and pretending to check in. "Oh, Sarah," Rebecca cooed with false sweetness, her eyes sliding toward Michael. "You look so fragile. Please rest. Don't push yourself. Michael, you must be so stressed carrying everything." Sarah's stomach twisted. Something in Rebecca's tone was too soft, too familiar. Yet Sarah, drained of strength, sat down quietly, convincing herself she was imagining it. Outside, neighbors gathered by the fence, gossiping as always. "Poor Sarah," one whispered. "She's sick and wasting money. That husband of hers deserves better." Another laughed cruelly. "A weak wife only drags a man down." Sarah closed her eyes, but she couldn't shut out their voices. She had given her all, and yet the world saw only weakness. She thought she still had Michael's loyalty. She thought Rebecca's kindness was genuine. She thought neighbors would understand. But as Michael leaned closer to Rebecca, smiling at something she whispered in his ear, Sarah felt an invisible crack open wide between them. The imbalance was no longer just money. It was trust, loyalty, and love slowly shifting away from her. And deep inside, though she fought it, Sarah knew her greatest sacrifice was about to cost her more than money. She never knew this was just the beginning. The sound of paper slamming against the table shook Sarah to her core. Michael had tossed another bill in front of her. "Do you see this?" he shouted, veins bulging on his neck. "Another $5,000. For medicine, for tests, for God knows what. You're draining me alive, Sarah." Sarah flinched, clutching the edge of her chair. The hospital discharge papers she had carried home yesterday now seemed like chains binding her spirit. The more she tried to hold her family together, the more she was painted as a burden. Later that morning, she returned to the clinic for a follow-up. Dr. Wilson, her longtime physician, greeted her with concern etched on his face. He was a tall man in his 50s, known for his honesty and compassion. Unlike others, he spoke with a gentleness that made his words heavier, not lighter. "Sarah," he said softly, scanning her test results, "your condition is not improving. If you stop treatment now, things could get much worse. I know the costs are heavy, but your life is not something to gamble with." Tears welled in her eyes. "Doctor, I've given all I have. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You must hold on. Health is priceless. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." But outside the clinic, as she stepped weakly into the waiting car, another storm awaited her. Mr. Parker, her father-in-law, was standing at the gate. A stern man in his 70s, proud and judgmental, he never missed a chance to scold. "So this is where my son's money disappears," he barked, glaring at the paper bag of medicine in her hands. "Look at you, thin, pale, weak. What good are you to him? You've cursed his life with nothing but expenses." Sarah lowered her head, her lips trembling. She wanted to scream that it was her money, her sacrifice, but her strength was gone. Michael arrived moments later. Instead of defending her, he adjusted his shirt collar and sighed. "Father's right, Sarah. You're making everything worse. Maybe I should stay with friends for a while. I need space." Her chest tightened as if crushed by invisible hands. She had sacrificed everything, yet the people closest to her only saw weakness. Michael turned away, sliding his phone from his pocket. The screen lit up with a message. Sarah's blurry vision caught only one word. "Rebecca." A smile tugged at his lips as he read. Sarah clutched the medicine bag to her chest, trembling. She had given everything to live, and yet she was already being pushed aside. The bills, the whispers, the distance. They were all gathering like a storm ready to break. What she didn't know was that betrayal had only begun to show its true face. The sound of a chair scraping violently across the floor made Sarah jolt. Michael stood towering over her, eyes blazing. "You sit there like a ghost while I carry everything," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "What kind of wife are you? Useless, sick, and draining me dry." Sarah's lips trembled. She had just returned from another exhausting hospital visit, her body fragile, her spirit thin as glass. She wanted to remind him she had spent her last savings not on comfort, but on survival. Yet the words stuck in her throat. Before she could gather her strength, the door creaked open. Uncle Martin stepped in without knocking. He was Sarah's mother's brother, a man who had always carried bitterness toward her since childhood. Stocky, sharp-tongued, and proud, he never missed an opportunity to tear her down. "Well, well," Martin sneered, arms folded. "Just look at you, Sarah. I told you years ago, nothing good comes from a woman like you. Weak body, weak mind, and now you've become a disgrace. You're nothing but a burden to this family." His words landed like stones in her chest. Family was supposed to protect, but Martin had always treated her as if she were cursed. Michael leaned back, nodding with grim satisfaction. "See, Sarah? Even your own blood agrees. Everyone sees it but you. You're the reason this house is sinking." Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to scream that she had fought, worked, and sacrificed for them both. But Uncle Martin's scornful chuckle drowned her voice before it could rise. Outside, as evening fell, neighbors gathered along the fence again, speaking just loud enough for her to hear. "Poor Michael," one said with pity. "He deserves better than a sickly wife," another replied. A third voice whispered cruelly, "Maybe that's why Rebecca is always around." Sarah's body ached, but her heart hurt more. The same neighbors who once praised her hard work now mocked her illness as if it were a crime. Even her old friends had started pulling away. Calls went unanswered, Visits stopped, and the silence grew heavier every day. She was no longer seen as Sarah, the devoted wife, only Sarah the sick, the failure, the woman dragging her husband down. Late that night, Sarah sat at the table, her thin hands tracing the hospital bills stacked high. The ink blurred through her tears. "Is this all I am now? Just debt and shame?" she whispered to herself. The door slammed open. Michael walked in, shirt rumpled, the scent of expensive perfume clinging to him. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. "Don't wait up for me," he said coldly, his eyes avoiding hers. "Your place in this house is gone. Accept it." Sarah's chest tightened until she could barely breathe. Her world was collapsing. Her husband, her family, her friends, even her neighbors. And yet she had no idea the humiliation was about to leave the walls of her home and spill into the public eye. She never knew betrayal was about to be announced before the whole community. The knock at the door came sharp and loud, startling Sarah where she sat in silence. When she opened it, Rebecca stood there with a bright smile and a basket of fruit in her hands. "Oh, Sarah," Rebecca said sweetly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You look so weak. I thought I'd check on you. You shouldn't be left alone in this state." Her words sounded caring, but her eyes flicked quickly toward Michael, who leaned lazily against the wall. Sarah caught it, that fleeting spark of connection between them, and her chest tightened. Michael smirked faintly. "See, Sarah? Not everyone abandons you. Rebecca's been around when you haven't had anyone else." Sarah forced a smile, though her gut twisted. Rebecca had been Michael's colleague at his old office, a woman who always seemed to linger near him. She brought fruit and warm words, but her visits felt more like intrusions than kindness. Later that evening, while Sarah rested in her room, Rebecca slipped outside with her friend Chloe. Chloe was the complete opposite of Rebecca's soft tone, sharp, greedy, and outspoken. "You're wasting time," Chloe hissed. "Michael's wife is practically a ghost. Why play the saint? If you really want the life you dream about, take him now. Don't wait. A man with money is nothing to delay." Rebecca hesitated, biting her lip. "But what if it looks bad? She's sick." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Who cares? People already gossip, and men want a woman who can give them life, not drain it. Take the chance before someone else does." Meanwhile, across town, Michael sat with his friend Brian at a bar. Brian was the kind of man who lived for ego and empty praise. He leaned in with a grin. "Brother, you're killing yourself with that sick woman. Look at Rebecca. Young, strong, loyal to you. Stop pretending you don't see it. You deserve better. Why waste your years on a dying wife?" Michael took a deep gulp of his drink. "You think so?" Brian slapped his shoulder. "I know so. You're the man. Don't chain yourself to a sinking ship. Step into the life you deserve." Back home, Sarah sat by the window, gazing at the dark sky. She replayed Rebecca's smile, Chloe's whispers she had overheard faintly, and Michael's growing distance. Her body was weak, but her spirit was still listening, still noticing. She whispered to herself, "Not everyone who brings fruit comes with love." The front door creaked. Michael and Rebecca entered together, laughing at something private. Their laughter froze when Sarah's eyes met theirs from the shadowed corner. For the first time, Sarah felt the walls of her marriage cracking wide open, and the world outside was about to see it. She never knew the betrayal was about to spill into the public square. "Get out!" Michael's roar thundered through the compound as he yanked the door wide open and shoved Sarah toward the crowd outside. His hand was rough on her frail shoulder. Neighbors gasped as the sickly woman stumbled onto the dusty ground, her medicine bag spilling open, bottles rolling everywhere. Before she could steady herself, Michael flung a stack of papers at her. They slapped against her chest and fluttered onto the street like dead leaves. Divorce papers. "You're no wife of mine anymore," he spat. "Sign them, Sarah. Today, in front of everyone. I won't carry your sickness or your debts another day." Sarah froze, her chest heaving as the neighbors pressed closer. Whispers rose like fire around her. "Is this really happening? She's being divorced in the street? Poor thing. Or maybe she deserves it." Her trembling fingers picked up the papers. Her eyes blurred as she tried to focus on the harsh words, "petition for divorce." Each letter stung like poison. Michael wasn't alone. Rebecca stepped boldly beside him, her hand sliding around his arm as though she had always belonged there. She smirked at Sarah, then raised her chin to the onlookers. "You all see," Rebecca said sweetly, though her eyes glittered with pride. "Michael deserves happiness. He deserves someone who can give him life, not drain it." The crowd buzzed louder. Sarah's heart pounded painfully in her chest. She wanted to scream, to remind them all of her sacrifices. The late nights, the money spent, the battles with her failing health. But her voice cracked before it could rise. From behind, Mr. Parker, Michael's father, stepped forward with his cane. His voice was sharp and merciless. "My son is right. A wife should bring honor, not shame. Sarah, you failed this family. It's better you leave now before you drag him deeper into the mud." The words crushed her, not just from Michael, not just from Rebecca, but now from the man she had once called father. The entire weight of the family had turned against her. She bent to gather her spilled medicine, her hands shaking, her breath shallow. The divorce papers lay on top of the pile, mocking her. For a moment, she closed her eyes and remembered her wedding day. Michael's vows, his smile, the promise to love her through sickness and health. That memory burned now like a cruel joke. When she looked up again, Michael was already walking away with Rebecca on his arm, waving proudly to the gossiping neighbors as though parading a trophy. Sarah collapsed to her knees, her body too weak to rise, her dignity torn to shreds before the entire community. And yet, as she clutched the papers to her chest, she felt a strange stillness. Something deep inside whispered that this wasn't the end. It was the dark valley before a rise no one could see. She never knew that after despair would come a letter that would change her destiny forever. The slam of the gate echoed like thunder in Sarah's ears. Michael's shadow disappeared down the street, Rebecca clinging to his arm like a prize. The crowd dispersed slowly, their whispers clinging to her skin like thorns. "Pathetic," one neighbor muttered. "She'll die alone," another sneered. Sarah collapsed on the cold ground, clutching the divorce papers against her chest. Her medicine bottles lay scattered in the dust. With every shallow breath, she felt her strength slipping away. Then a harsh voice cut through the silence. Uncle Martin stood above her, arms crossed, lips curled into a bitter smile. "You see, Sarah," he barked, "this is what you get for being weak. You always thought you were better than everyone. Now look at you, thrown out, worthless, abandoned. You brought shame to this family and don't expect me to carry you." The words stabbed like knives. She wanted to remind him that she had worked, sacrificed, endured. But her throat was too dry, her spirit too broken. Tears blurred her eyes as she whispered, "Uncle, please." He spat on the ground beside her. "Don't call me that. I don't carry failures in my blood." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her trembling in the dirt. As the shadows lengthened, a gentler voice called her name. "Sarah?" She lifted her head weakly. It was Thomas, her younger brother, estranged for years after a bitter family rift. He knelt beside her, his face filled with regret and sorrow. "Sarah," he said, voice breaking, "I should have been here earlier. I thought distance would protect me from our family's fights. But seeing you like this..." He reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "You're still my sister, and I won't leave you again." Sarah's tears spilled freely as she whispered, "Thomas, I thought I lost you forever." Before she could say more, another figure hurried toward her. Martha, a middle-aged caregiver who had once nursed Sarah during her treatments, crouched beside her. Her touch was firm, practical, but her eyes were kind. "Don't speak," Martha said gently. "Save your strength. You need care, not arguments." She began gathering the medicine bottles, wiping the dirt from Sarah's hands. For the first time in days, Sarah felt hands lifting her instead of pushing her down. She leaned weakly against Thomas as Martha supported her other side. Inside Thomas's small car, silence filled the air. Sarah closed her eyes, her chest rising and falling slowly. She could still hear the echoes of Uncle Martin's cruel voice, Michael's betrayal, Rebecca's smug smile. But beneath it, she also heard Thomas's promise and Martha's steady reassurance. It was the faintest flicker of light in her darkness, and though she was too weak to realize it, That light would soon lead her to a revelation greater than anything she had imagined. But for now, her body gave in. Her cough shook the silence, and blood stained her handkerchief. Thomas and Martha's eyes widened in fear. They didn't know a letter was about to surface, one that would change Sarah's destiny forever. The pounding at the door jolted Sarah awake. She had fallen asleep on Thomas's couch, her body still weak from the collapse. Thomas rushed to open it, and in stepped a tall woman in a dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Her voice was firm but respectful. "I am Mrs. Turner, attorney at law. I need to see Sarah Johnson immediately. It concerns her late Uncle Edward." Sarah sat up slowly, confusion in her eyes. Uncle Edward? He had been the quiet, distant elder in her family. A man of principle, a man she thought barely noticed her struggles. Why would his lawyer come now? Mrs. Turner set the briefcase on the table and opened it with precision. She pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges. "This letter was written before Mr. Edward passed away. He instructed me to deliver it only when Sarah reached her lowest point." Thomas's brows furrowed. "Lowest point? She's already been humiliated, betrayed, and thrown out. What more could they mean?" Sarah's fingers shook as she tore open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, bold strokes across the page. "My dear Sarah, if you are reading this, it means the world has tried to break you. Do not despair. The fire you are walking through is not to destroy you, but to refine you. I have set aside a great inheritance, but it comes with one condition. You must never use it for revenge, only for purpose. Let your pain become light for others. Stand tall, even when the world calls you weak. The storm is not the end, but the beginning of your rise." Sarah pressed the letter to her chest. Tears streamed down her face, not of sorrow this time, but of something new, hope flickering through the ashes of despair. At that moment, Reverend James entered quietly. He was a kind elder from a nearby church, known for visiting the brokenhearted. His voice carried gentle authority as he said, "I heard of your suffering, Sarah, and I came to pray. But now I see the Lord has already sent you a message through your uncle." He sat across from her, his eyes warm but piercing. "Do not give in to anger. Do not let their cruelty define you. The world thinks you are finished, but heaven knows you are only beginning. Use this gift wisely, and your story will heal many." Sarah gripped the letter tighter. For the first time since her betrayal, her shoulders straightened slightly, her eyes no longer only filled with defeat. But outside, on the same street, Rebecca's laughter echoed as she walked arm in arm with Michael, their shadows stretching toward the house. Sarah didn't know it yet, but while hope was being placed in her hands, greed was drawing closer, ready to test her new resolve. She never knew the letter was only the first step toward a fortune that would change everything. "Sit down, Sarah. What you're about to hear will change your life." Mrs. Turner's voice filled the quiet law office. The heavy blinds were drawn, the door locked, the air thick with anticipation. Across the table, Sarah sat trembling, her brother Thomas by her side, Martha's supportive hand resting gently on her arm. With a click, Mrs. Turner placed a thick folder on the desk. Her eyes met Sarah's with calm authority. "Your late Uncle Edward left you as his sole heir. His estate is valued at $100 million. But it is not just money, it is responsibility. His conditions are strict." The words hit like a thunderclap. Sarah gasped, her breath shallow. 100 million? It was too vast to imagine. She, the woman thrown into the street like trash, was now the heiress to a fortune that could reshape lives. Thomas gripped her hand tighter. "Sarah, do you understand what this means? You'll never have to bow to anyone again. You'll never be called worthless again." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes, but she shook her head gently. "This isn't for revenge. Uncle Edward's letter said it clearly. This must be used for purpose, not pride. If I lose sight of that, then I fail him, and I fail myself." At that moment, the office door opened and a younger woman stepped in. She was petite, with kind eyes behind simple glasses, carrying a stack of documents. "This is Olivia," Mrs. Turner introduced. "My assistant. She will help you handle the paperwork discreetly. Olivia is loyal, trustworthy, and understands the importance of confidentiality." Olivia smiled warmly. Sarah, I'll make sure your name is protected. No one, not Michael, not Rebecca, not even your bitter relatives, will know about this until you are ready. My job is to keep you safe. Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude. After so much betrayal, the quiet loyalty of a stranger felt like gold. As signatures were exchanged and documents sealed, Sarah felt the weight of her suffering shift into something new. Power, not the loud, boastful kind Michael craved, but the quiet, steady power of dignity. When the final paper was signed, Mrs. Turner closed the file with a decisive snap. It's done. You are now in control of your uncle's legacy. But remember, use it with wisdom. His eyes are still on you, even from the grave. Sarah exhaled deeply, her hands trembling over the fresh documents. For the first time in months, she felt not just alive, but anchored to a future. But outside the law office, unseen to her, Michael leaned against his car, Rebecca at his side. They had followed her here, suspicion flickering in their eyes. Michael narrowed his gaze. Why would she come to a lawyer? She has nothing left. Rebecca smirked. Unless she's hiding something. Sarah didn't know it yet, but the very people who had cast her away were about to circle back, not with love, but with greed sharpened like knives. She never knew that Michael's false regret was already forming, waiting to knock at her door. The pounding on the door was so violent that Thomas leapt to his feet. Before he could reach it, the door swung open with a crash. Michael stormed in, his hair disheveled, his eyes swollen as if he had been crying all night. He dropped to his knees so suddenly that Sarah flinched. Sarah, he wailed, clutching at her dress. Forgive me. I was a fool. Rebecca deceived me. She used me. I see it now. You're the only woman who ever truly loved me. Please, take me back. His tears spilled, his voice cracked, and for a moment anyone else might have believed him. But Sarah, frail though she was, saw something cold flicker behind his eyes. Desperation, not love. Before she could answer, Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her arms folded, her lips curled in disdain. She didn't look like a woman abandoned. She looked like a woman plotting. Her eyes darted at Sarah's neat clothes, the quiet dignity in the room, the calm around her. Jealousy burned. When Michael stumbled outside for air, Rebecca seized his arm, her voice low and venomous. Stop begging for her heart. Beg for her money. Can't you see? She's hiding something. No woman thrown away lives this calm unless she's holding power. Use her guilt. Drain her before she drains you. Michael's friend Brian waited by the car, puffing a cigarette, his grin wide. He slapped Michael's back and sneered. That was good, man. You nearly fooled her. Push harder. Make her remember the years you gave her. Twist the knife. Tell her she owes you everything. Women like her, soft hearts. Easy prey. Back inside, Sarah sat quietly. She heard the muffled whispers outside, and it all fit together. Rebecca's smug smile, Michael's sudden return, Brian's constant influence. It wasn't love driving Michael back to her doorstep. It was greed. Michael stormed back in, kneeling again, but this time his voice was harsher, more insistent. Sarah, I gave you my best years. You owe me. Let's start over. We can build again. Together. You can't shut me out. Sarah's fingers clenched around Uncle Edward's letter in her lap. She rose slowly, her frail frame trembling, but her eyes locked on him with a new fire. No, Michael, she said softly, yet her voice carried through the room like thunder. I owe you nothing. You threw me away when I was weakest. You paraded another woman in front of me. You shoved divorce papers into my hands. That door you closed? I will never open it again. She stepped forward, her thin hand reaching for the door. Her brother Thomas stood ready beside her, Martha at her back. Sarah pulled the door wide open and pointed to the street. Leave, and do not come back. The slam echoed like a gavel, final and unshakable. Outside, Michael staggered, Rebecca seethed, and Brian's grin finally faltered. The mask of control was slipping from their hands. Inside, Sarah leaned on the wall, her chest heaving. She was still weak in body, but for the first time, she felt strong in spirit. She had chosen dignity over manipulation. Yet even as she steadied herself, a shadow lingered in her mind. Michael's pride would not let this end. She never knew his hunger for wealth was about to drag them all into ruin. The shriek of laughter echoed through the boutique as Rebecca strutted inside, her arms stacked with glossy shopping bags. Diamond earrings sparkled at her ears, a new designer handbag swinging from her wrist. Every step was a performance, her heels clacking like applause meant only for her. "Michael bought me this one," she bragged loudly to the clerk, holding up a silk gown. "And this one too. Oh, you wouldn't believe the gifts he showers me with. Poor Sarah never had this taste. I'm living the life she could only dream of." The clerks forced polite smiles, but whispers rippled among the customers nearby. "Isn't that Sarah's husband? Weren't they struggling with hospital bills? Strange, where's all this money suddenly coming from?" Rebecca ignored the murmurs, basking in her illusion of victory. But at the corner of the shop, Chloe, her closest friend and partner in ambition, leaned against a rack with her arms crossed, her expression sour. "You're flashing too much, Rebecca," Chloe snapped quietly. "This won't last forever. Michael's not as rich as you think. If you're smart, you'll secure someone with deeper pockets before it all dries up." Rebecca frowned. "Michael promised me everything. He's giving me what I deserve." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Deserve? Look around you. His money is leaking like water from a broken bucket. He can't keep up with your lifestyle. And when it runs out, don't expect me to stick around to clap for you. I want real wealth, Rebecca, not scraps from a desperate man." With that, Chloe turned on her heel and left, her loyalty evaporating with the sound of her heels clicking against the floor. For the first time, Rebecca felt the weight of doubt settling on her chest. Meanwhile, across town, Michael tried to keep up the image. He stood at a local gathering, boasting to old acquaintances. "My wife, Rebecca, she deserves the best. I can provide it. Don't compare me to men who struggle. I'm above that." But the men whispered behind his back. "Wasn't he the one who threw Sarah out like trash? He acts rich, but I heard his business deals are falling apart. Pride comes before the fall. Watch him." The false crown on Michael's head was slipping. Every dollar spent on Rebecca's glitter cut deeper into his empty accounts. And yet he kept smiling, desperate to hold on to an image already cracking. Back at home, Rebecca opened another jewelry box, forcing a smile as she slid a necklace over her collarbone. But when she glanced at Michael's face, she saw it. Sweat, nerves, and a darkness he couldn't hide. "Michael?" she asked slowly. "We're not running out, are we?" His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Silence filled the room, heavier than gold. And though Rebecca tried to push it away, a shadow of fear crossed her heart. She never knew her own betrayal was already being written in the dark corners of Michael's downfall. The crash of glass echoed across the restaurant as Michael slapped a wine bottle off the table. Rebecca jerked back, eyes flashing with fury. "Why is the card declined again?" she shouted, her voice rising above the murmurs of other diners. "Michael, you promised me a life of luxury, not embarrassment." Heads turned, whispers filled the air. Michael's face flushed with shame as the waiter quietly bent to clean the mess. "Calm down," Michael hissed, gripping her wrist. "It's just a delay. The money will come. I'll fix it." But Rebecca's eyes had already shifted across the room. At a nearby table sat Mr. Dalton, a wealthy investor in his 50s, draped in a suit finer than anything Michael owned. He watched the scene with quiet amusement, a glass of champagne in his hand. Later that night, while Michael sulked in the car, Rebecca slipped away under the excuse of fresh air. She found Dalton on the balcony, his laughter rich, his words smoother than silk. "You don't belong with a man drowning in debt," Dalton murmured, brushing a finger against the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "A woman like you deserves a man who can keep her shining." Rebecca's heart pounded. She smiled coyly, already weighing her options. For days afterward, Michael noticed money disappearing faster than ever. New clothes, new jewelry, new parties, all charged in his name. He confronted Rebecca once, only to be met with her sharp tongue. "Don't lecture me," she spat. "You threw away your sick wife for me. Don't act holy now. If you can't provide, I'll find someone who can." Brian, who once cheered Michael's arrogance, began to distance himself. When the drinks stopped flowing and the parties ended, His calls grew fewer, his excuses grew longer. One evening, Michael stood at the entrance of an upscale hotel, trying to stop Rebecca from walking inside with Dalton. His voice cracked with desperation. "Rebecca, please, you can't do this to me. After everything I gave you." She laughed cruelly, slipping her hand into Dalton's arm. "Everything. You gave me scraps, Michael. Dalton is offering me the life I deserve. You are finished." The hotel guard stepped forward, pushing Michael back as Dalton and Rebecca disappeared inside. The door closed, shutting him out. For the first time, Michael felt the sting of abandonment pierce his chest. The humiliation was public, the betrayal undeniable. He staggered back into the night, broke, alone, and mocked by the very people who once admired him. The same taste of betrayal he forced on Sarah had now become his own bitter drink. But worse storms were coming, because while Rebecca had found her new place, Michael's downfall was only just beginning. He never knew that true loyalty was about to shine, and it wouldn't be his to claim. The coughing fit hit Sarah so hard she nearly collapsed in the middle of the street. Her knees buckled, the medicine bag almost slipping from her weak hands. Martha rushed forward to catch her, panic flashing across her face. "Sarah, breathe slowly. You're safe. Don't push yourself," Martha said firmly, guiding her to a bench. Thomas ran to a nearby pharmacy for water, his expression grim with worry. People passed by, staring at Sarah but not stopping, some even whispering cruel words as they hurried along. "Isn't that the woman whose husband left her?" one muttered. "She looks worse every day," another sneered. Sarah's eyes welled up. It was the same world that mocked her collapse, the same world that had celebrated her shame. But then Thomas returned, kneeling by her side, his hand steady. "Don't listen to them," he said. "You're my sister, Sarah, and I won't let you fight this battle alone anymore. I left once. I won't make that mistake again." The sincerity in his voice broke through her despair. For years, their family feud had left a gap between them. But here he was, carrying her weight when others mocked her. Martha added firmly, "And I'll stand too. You're not alone. I've nursed people who had no one, and I won't let you go through this valley without care. As long as I'm alive, you'll always have a hand to steady you." Sarah's lips trembled. For the first time in so long, she felt arms holding her instead of pushing her away. They flagged down a taxi. A beat-up yellow cab screeched to a halt. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and calloused hands, stepped out quickly to help them load Sarah in. When Thomas reached for his wallet, panic spread across his face. He had forgotten his cash in the rush. I don't have enough money right now. I'll pay double later, I swear." The driver shook his head with a gentle smile. "Don't worry, I see her condition. A woman in this state shouldn't be left on the road because of money. Sit down, we'll get her home safe." Sarah's chest tightened, but this time not with pain. It was the weight of kindness. Simple, honest, unexpected kindness. She whispered, "Thank you, sir. You don't know what this means to me." The driver met her eyes through the rearview mirror. Sometimes all a person needs is someone willing to carry them 1 mile further than the world is willing to go. Tears slid down Sarah's cheeks as she leaned against Thomas's shoulder, Martha holding her hand. For the first time in months, she felt the fragile beginnings of trust and hope returning. But outside the window, the city buzzed with whispers. Some faces looked on with pity, others with scorn. And in the shadows, Michael's prideful figure lingered, watching silently as the cab carried her away. Sarah didn't know it yet, but while true loyalty was finally blooming in her life, Michael's world of lies was crumbling faster than he could control. She never knew that resilience would soon build into a force that even her enemies couldn't silence. The hammer struck the wooden frame with a loud crack that echoed across the street. Neighbors gathered curiously, watching as construction workers hurried back and forth. But these weren't ordinary workers. Among them were women who had once been mocked for their illnesses, men rejected after accidents, and young people abandoned because of disability. At the center of it all stood Sarah, pale but resolute, directing with a clipboard in her hand. Her voice rang clear despite her fragile frame. "Every hand matters here. No one is too broken to build again." Martha moved quickly beside her, guiding volunteers and making sure Sarah didn't overexert herself. Thomas lifted heavy boards, his shirt drenched in sweat, determined to be the shield Sarah had lacked for so long. The community whispered from a distance, "Is that Sarah? The same woman Michael threw out? She's hiring the weak, the rejected. What is she doing? Building something bigger than revenge." Inside the newly painted building, Reverend James stood by Sarah, his Bible in one hand. His deep voice carried both comfort and conviction. "Out of suffering comes light," he said softly. "Sarah, you are turning pain into purpose. Do not forget, this is not just for you. It is for every person who once thought life was over." Sarah lowered her head, tears brimming. "I was left with nothing, but in my nothingness, God gave me everything. I cannot waste this chance." One by one, old supporters who had drifted away began to return. Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who once bought from Sarah's small shop, stepped forward with a donation of fresh vegetables for the workers. "I misjudged you," she whispered, gripping Sarah's hand. "Forgive me." Others followed. Small gifts, kind words, hesitant apologies. The same mouths that once mocked her now began to praise her. But Sarah never lifted herself with pride. Instead, she looked at the rows of wheelchairs, the patients-turned workers, and said, "This foundation is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us who know what it means to be broken and to rise again." The first signboard was lifted into place. New Dawn Foundation. The crowd gasped as they read it. Hope flickered in the eyes of people who had never believed in second chances. But as cheers spread, Sarah caught sight of a face in the distance. Michael. His clothes were worn, his pride thinner than ever, his eyes burning with jealousy as he watched her stand tall in front of the people who once scorned her. His fists clenched at his sides. The woman he had humiliated was now becoming someone the whole community respected. And Sarah, though she stood firm, felt her heart race. Because she knew Michael's pride would never accept her rise without resistance. She never knew that her public triumph would soon collide with his desperate downfall. The courtyard roared with claps and cheers as the banner of New Dawn Foundation fluttered in the breeze. Reporters shoved microphones forward. Flashes of cameras lit the stage, and the community pressed closer. At the center, Sarah stood gracefully, cane in hand, her voice rising above the noise. "I was once called worthless," she declared, her eyes shining. "I was once thrown out when I was weak. But today I stand alive because pain did not destroy me. It shaped me into purpose. New Dawn is proof that no one's suffering is wasted." The applause thundered, echoing through the streets. Suddenly, a broken figure pushed through the crowd. Michael. His clothes were wrinkled, his shoes scuffed, his face pale with shame. He stumbled forward and dropped to his knees in front of her. "Sarah," his voice cracked. "Please, forgive me. I was a fool. Rebecca left me with nothing. I see now. You were my true blessing all along. I don't deserve it, but please, take me back. I have nowhere else to go." The crowd gasped, whispers spreading like wildfire. "Isn't that her husband who humiliated her? Now he's begging in the dirt. What a disgrace." All eyes turned to Sarah. Her heart trembled as memories rushed back. The night he shoved divorce papers into her chest, the whispers of neighbors laughing at her pain, Rebecca's smirk as she clung to his arm. For a long moment, silence stretched heavy in the air. Then slowly, Sarah leaned forward. Her voice was soft, yet it carried like thunder. "Michael," she said, "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry the weight of your cruelty any longer." Michael's eyes widened with desperate hope, reaching for her hand. But Sarah stepped back gently, her chin lifted. "Forgiveness is not the same as return," she continued. "You taught me that love without loyalty is poison. You chose pride over me, and that choice cannot be erased. I release you from my heart, but I will not take you back into my life." The crowd erupted, some gasping, others cheering loudly. Mothers wiped tears, men nodded in respect, and those she had helped raised their hands in applause. Michael broke down completely, sobbing on the pavement. "Please, Sarah, don't leave me like this." But Sarah's eyes, glistening with tears of her own, turned to the people around her. She raised the old hospital bill high, her voice steady. "This paper was once a symbol of my despair. Today, It is a reminder that no betrayal can bury the strength within us. My mission is not to return to the past. My mission is to build a future where no one else is left alone in their weakest hour. The people erupted into thunderous applause, Sophie the journalist capturing every word. Michael wept in the dust, but Sarah walked forward into the light of her new destiny, forgiven, free, but untouchable. She never knew that her forgiveness would become the very seed of a global movement of hope. The wail of a sick child pierced the air as the clinic doors swung open. A mother stumbled in, clutching her daughter whose body burned with fever. The crowd waiting inside parted, their faces tense with fear and hope. "Please," the mother cried, collapsing to her knees. "I have nothing left. Save my child." Before the words could sink into despair, Sarah stepped forward. Her cane tapped against the floor, her presence steady as sunlight through storm clouds. "Bring her in," Sarah ordered softly. "Here, no one will be turned away. Treatment will never depend on money again." Doctors and nurses, many of them once abandoned patients themselves, hurried to lift the child. The mother sobbed, clinging to Sarah's dress, whispering, "God bless you. God bless you." As the room settled, Sarah walked through the hallways of the New Dawn Foundation, watching the once broken find dignity again. A man with a prosthetic leg worked as a receptionist. A woman recovering from cancer organized supplies with a smile. Former outcasts had become the very pillars of her mission. Her eyes watered as she whispered to Martha, "This is what Uncle Edward wanted. Not revenge, but redemption." Martha squeezed her arm. "And you've done it, Sarah. You've given people a reason to live again." That day, Sophie, the journalist, returned with a camera crew. She moved through the clinic, documenting every tear, every laugh, every miracle. Later, her article hit the headlines. "The woman the world rejected becomes the mother of a nation's hope." Donors began pouring in, inspired by the story. Letters arrived from investors, churches, and charities. Checks were written, partnerships formed. What began as one woman's brokenness was now becoming a movement stretching far beyond the city. Sarah stood before her team at sunset, her voice strong despite her scars. "We will build clinics in every town. We will send medicine to the forgotten. This foundation is not mine, it is ours, and it will outlive us." The workers cheered, their voices rising in harmony. Outside the gates, unnoticed, Michael stood watching, hollow-eyed, ragged, and hungry. He pressed a hand against the fence as if trying to touch the world that had slipped from his grasp. But Sarah never turned toward him. Her eyes faced the future, not the past. The sun dipped low, casting golden light on the signboard. New Dawn Foundation. Sarah closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "What was meant to bury me became my wings." The cheers swelled again. The poor, the sick, the forgotten, all raising their hands, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. Her story had begun with betrayal, but it ended with power greater than revenge. A legacy of love multiplied into thousands of lives. And yet, even as her chapter closed, her journey was not over. Because true light, once lit, does not stop at one corner. It spreads to the ends of the earth. She never knew this was only the beginning of a global dawn. Husband threw out his poor wife after she was fired from her job, unaware of her $200 million inheritance. He threw his wife out just days after she lost her job, calling her useless and unworthy of his name. Then walked back inside arm in arm with Vanessa, the same childhood friend who once toasted their wedding with tears of joy. He never knew Sophia carried a hidden fortune that could shake empires. "Stay out of my house, Sophia. You're nothing but failure and shame. Pack your things and leave. I refuse to waste my life on a woman who can't even hold a job." Those were the venomous words Daniel Carter spat as Sophia stood trembling at the mansion gate, her suitcase heavy, her hands clutching the crumpled termination letter that marked her humiliation. Instead of standing by her, he abandoned her. Instead of love, he delivered rejection in the hour she needed him most. He believed she was finished. But what he never imagined was that the same woman he cast out as worthless would rise with a power beyond his reach. A rise that would expose his betrayal, shatter his pride, and bring him to his knees. Sometimes the firing that breaks you is the flame that remakes you. Sometimes the woman mocked as nothing becomes the very name the world will never forget. This is not just another story of betrayal. It is the cry of a wife despised in her weakest moment, the ashes of humiliation turned into strength. And the warning life too often whispers, never despise the broken, for they may rise higher than you could ever dream. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. As we step into this story, I ask from my heart, don't just hear Sophia's pain and scroll away. Subscribe now, and in the comments share where you're watching from. So Sophia, and every woman betrayed, knows she is not alone. The voice of Mr. Clark, the company director, boomed like a hammer against glass. The words struck like a whip. Sophia Carter, you're fired. Mr. Clark, the company director, didn't even look at her as he hurled the words across the polished oak desk. His hand slammed a crisp termination letter onto the surface. Papers slid to the floor. A silence, thick and sharp, filled the office. Sophia's heart sank. Her ears rang as though the world had collapsed into that one sentence. She had given this company everything. Early mornings, late nights, skipped dinners, missed anniversaries. Every sacrifice, she told herself, was not just for a paycheck, but for Daniel, for her husband's pride, for his dream of living like a man respected by society. Gasps rippled across the room. Grace Taylor, a sharp-tongued colleague who lived on gossip, leaned back in her chair with a smirk. See? I told you she wouldn't last, she hissed to another. Poor thing can't even keep a simple job. Sophia bent down, her hands trembling as she gathered the scattered papers. Her knuckles brushed the floor, and shame washed over her. For years, she had worked herself to exhaustion, even when her body begged for rest. Daniel would grumble about bills, about appearances, about how his friends had wives who contributed more. Sophia would smile softly, put her head down and whisper, I'll try harder, Daniel. I'll do better. That quiet devotion had been her compass. She wanted him to look at her and feel proud. She wanted his family, especially Margaret, her cold-eyed mother-in-law, to see her worth. She wanted Vanessa, her childhood friend and constant presence at their home, to say, Sophia is Daniel's strength. But now, as she clutched the wrinkled termination letter, all she heard were the echoes of mockery. Look at her, Grace said louder now, eyes flashing with cruelty. Poor Sophia, fired, worthless. Sophia's cheeks burned hot. She forced her lips together to keep from crying. Standing beside her, Vanessa Moore placed a hand gently on her shoulder. To anyone watching, Vanessa looked like the perfect friend, offering comfort in Sophia's darkest hour. But Sophia, in her blurred vision, missed the flicker of satisfaction in Vanessa's smile. Grace caught it, though, a private smirk, as though Vanessa was tasting victory in Sophia's fall. Don't worry, Sophia, Vanessa cooed, her voice soft enough for others to hear. You'll find another job. Sometimes life pushes us in ways we don't understand. Sophia nodded weakly, unaware that behind those words was betrayal brewing like storm clouds. She rose to her feet, her dignity shaking, but still intact. Every eye followed her as she walked out of the office. The lobby glass reflected her pale, tired face back at her. She hardly recognized herself. This wasn't the devoted wife who cooked Daniel's meals at dawn, ironed his shirts before sunrise, and worked long hours just to ease his burdens. This was a broken shell. Her phone vibrated. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. She pressed it to her ear, praying for a shred of comfort. Instead, his voice crashed like fire. You got fired? Sophia, are you serious? How useless can you be? I warned you. You dragged me down. Don't expect sympathy when you come home. The line went dead. Her knees buckled. She gripped the railing of the lobby staircase to keep from falling. She thought of all the times she carried his dreams like her own, how she swallowed every insult from Margaret just to keep peace, how she leaned on Vanessa's shoulder believing she had a true friend. And now, all of it was for nothing. Tears blurred her vision as she stepped into the parking lot. She clutched the letter so tightly the paper creased under her fingers. A group of younger employees whispered near the exit. She caught fragments. Daniel's wife. So embarrassing. She should hide. Sophia pressed her lips together, holding back a sob. She had been reduced to gossip, a headline in other people's mouths. She forced herself forward, suitcase dragging behind her feet. But inside, her devotion still whispered, "Maybe if I explain to Daniel, he will understand. Maybe if I show him how much I've sacrificed, he will see me." Yet in her heart, she already knew. Daniel's pride was a wall higher than love, and on the other side of that wall stood Margaret and Vanessa, both ready to push her further down. The sun dimmed behind a cloud as she reached the street. The crumpled letter in her hand felt heavier than stone. What Sophia did not know, what no one in that office could have guessed, was that this same letter, soaked in her tears, would one day hang in a golden frame as a symbol of triumph. For now, though, it was only humiliation, and waiting at home was a storm far crueler than being fired. The mansion walls shook with Daniel Carter's fury. "How could you embarrass me like this, Sophia?" he thundered, slamming his hand against the marble table. "Do you know how small I looked when people whispered that my wife got fired? Do you know what that does to my name?" Sophia flinched. She had barely stepped through the front door with her suitcase when his voice roared across the room. Her heart thudded. She wanted to explain that she had tried, that she had worked until her bones ached. But his eyes, cold and sharp, warned her that no words would matter. Across the room, Margaret Carter, his mother, sat tall in her velvet chair, lips curved into a bitter smile. "I warned you, Daniel," she said, her tone dripping with contempt. "This girl drags you down. A man like you needs a woman of means, a wife who lifts you up, not one who sinks you." Sophia's chest tightened. Margaret had never accepted her, not once. From the first day she entered this mansion, she had been reminded that she was poor, unworthy, a stain on the Carter name. Now her firing had become fuel for Margaret's triumph. Vanessa Moore entered the living room then, heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She wore a smile of gentle sympathy, carrying a tray of tea as though she were there to ease the tension. To Sophia, she looked like a friend, always present, always supportive. But when Daniel's gaze slid to Vanessa, the warmth in his eyes betrayed more than friendship. "Daniel," Vanessa said sweetly, setting the tray down, "don't be too harsh. Sophia only lost a job. Maybe this is life's way of showing you both something new." Her words seemed soft, but her eyes flickered toward Margaret, who nodded approvingly. Sophia stood frozen, her humiliation deepening. Was Vanessa siding with them, the same Vanessa who once toasted her marriage with tears of joy? Before she could speak, another voice entered the fray. Evelyn Carter, Sophia's older sister, stepped into the room. She had been called there by Margaret earlier, under the pretense of family support. Evelyn's arms were folded, her expression hard. "Sophia," Evelyn said sharply, "you should endure your marriage. Stop bringing shame. Daniel is right to be angry. A wife's duty is to obey her husband and protect his pride." The words sliced deeper than Daniel's rage. Her own blood had turned against her. Sophia's lips trembled. "Evelyn, you of all people—" But Evelyn shook her head coldly. "Don't look at me for pity. You chose this life. Now live with it." Silence thickened in the room. Sophia's eyes darted between Daniel's clenched fists, Margaret's satisfied smirk, Vanessa's hidden glee, and Evelyn's cold judgment. Every corner of her world had collapsed. Even family had abandoned her. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, to remind them of her years of devotion and sacrifice. But the words withered on her tongue. Then Daniel moved closer, his voice a dagger. "You either find a way to prove you're worth something, or you leave this house. I won't carry dead weight, Sophia. Not anymore." Margaret clapped softly, like a queen applauding a decree. Vanessa smiled behind her teacup. Evelyn turned away unmoved. Sophia's hands trembled as she gripped the crumpled termination letter still in her pocket. The paper that marked her shame now felt like a death sentence, and though her voice refused to rise, her heart whispered something stronger. This is not the end. Not yet. What Sophia did not know was that the very next time she stood at this mansion's gate, she would not be walking in with a suitcase of shame. She would be forced out in front of the world. The mansion gate slammed open with a thunderous crash. Daniel Carter stormed out, his face red with fury, one hand gripping Sophia's suitcase, the other clutching her crumpled termination letter. He dragged both like evidence of her failure. Behind him trailed Margaret, her mother-in-law, lips curved into a proud sneer, and Vanessa Moore, her so-called friend, smiling faintly at the chaos she secretly enjoyed. "You're finished, Sophia," Daniel roared loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. "A wife who can't even keep a job has no place in my house." The neighbors gathered quickly. Grace Taylor, the sharp-tongued woman from down the street, whispered into another's ear, her voice carrying just far enough. "Look, Daniel's throwing her out, fired and thrown away. Poor Sophia, she really is nothing." Sophia stumbled behind them, her hands trembling as she tried to hold her dignity together. Her heart raced with humiliation. This was not a quiet argument inside their home. This was public execution. Every whisper, every stare, every mocking smirk pressed against her chest like 1,000 stones. Daniel hurled the suitcase down on the pavement, clothes spilling into the dust. He raised the letter in his hand like a weapon. Here's proof." His voice dripped venom. "My wife, fired, useless, shameful." The neighbors gasped, some pretending pity while others nodded in cruel satisfaction. Margaret clapped softly, proud of her son's performance. Vanessa touched Daniel's arm lightly, as though to calm him, but her eyes gleamed with triumph. Sophia's knees wavered. She bent down to gather her scattered clothes, her hands brushing the dirt. Memories of her quiet devotion surged back. Ironing Daniel's shirts at dawn, cooking his favorite meals after long days, working late shifts to keep the house afloat. And this was her reward, to be paraded like trash before strangers. Her eyes lifted for a moment, meeting Evelyn's gaze across the street. Her sister had been called there too. Sophia's lips trembled, silently pleading for support, but Evelyn only folded her arms and turned away, her expression cold. "Endure your marriage," she had said before. Now she stood as silent judge, siding with Daniel through her stillness. Sophia's tears spilled, betrayed by her husband, betrayed by her friend, betrayed by her own blood. The humiliation deepened when Grace's mocking voice rose louder. "She's nothing but a burden. Daniel deserves better." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sophia clutched her suitcase, her dignity shredded. She wanted to scream, to shout her worth, but her voice refused to rise. Daniel's finger pointed down the street. "Leave. Don't ever set foot in this house again. You're worthless, Sophia." Her body trembled. She stumbled away from the gate, each step heavier than the last. Her suitcase rolled crookedly, her tears staining the dirt. Behind her, Margaret's satisfied clap echoed like a drumbeat, and Vanessa's smile widened as Daniel draped an arm casually around her shoulders. The world blurred around Sophia as her legs weakened. At the corner bench, she collapsed, her chest heaving, her spirit crushed, her eyes dimmed with despair. But just as her body leaned forward, ready to fall into nothingness, a shadow stretched across her. A gentle voice whispered, "Child, come with me. You don't belong in the dirt." It was Harriet Cole, the elder from the community, a woman Sophia barely knew, but whose presence now felt like light breaking through storm clouds. What Sophia did not yet realize was that this stranger's compassion would lead her to a shelter, and to the wisdom that would plant the first seeds of her rebirth. Sophia's legs finally gave out beneath her. At the edge of the street, near a weathered wooden bench, she collapsed with a thud, her suitcase tipping over and spilling clothes into the dirt. Her breath came in broken gasps. The humiliation from the mansion still echoed in her ears. Daniel's roar, Margaret's clap, Vanessa's smirk, Evelyn's silence. Each memory stabbed her chest like shards of glass. Passers-by glanced, whispered, and hurried on. No one bent down. No one cared. To them, she was just a fired woman abandoned by her husband. Tears streamed down Sophia's cheeks, falling onto the crumpled termination letter still clutched in her hand. She whispered through trembling lips, "God, why me? What did I do wrong? I gave him everything. My years, my love, my strength. Why was that not enough?" Her mind spun back to the mornings she rose before dawn to iron Daniel's shirts, to cook his meals, to make sure he walked into his world looking like a king. She remembered working double shifts at the office when bills piled high, swallowing exhaustion so Daniel could boast, "My wife supports me." She even endured Margaret's sneers, Vanessa's constant presence, and Evelyn's cold words, all for the sake of her marriage. Now all of that devotion had bought her nothing but shame. Her chest heaved as she buried her face in her hands. She thought of ending it all, of vanishing into the silence where no laughter or mockery could touch her again. Then, a shadow stretched across her. A hand, warm and steady, rested on her shoulder. A voice, deep with age yet soft with compassion, broke through her despair. "Child," the voice said gently, "the ground is no place for you. Come with me." Sophia lifted her tear-stained face. Standing above her was Harriet Cole, a respected elder in the community. Harriet was in her late 60s with silver hair tied neatly in a scarf and eyes that carried both sorrow and wisdom. She was known in the neighborhood as the woman who had seen much loss but never lost her kindness. Sophia's lips trembled. "Why would you stop for me? I am nothing, worthless." Harriet bent down, helping her to her feet. "No one is worthless. They may strip you of comfort, but they cannot strip you of dignity. Come, my home is small, but it will keep you warm." Sophia hesitated, her body heavy with doubt. Everyone else had turned away. Daniel, Margaret, Vanessa, Evelyn. Could she trust this stranger? But the firmness in Harriet's grip told her she was safe. Slowly, Sophia nodded, wiping her tears. Harriet lifted the suitcase, brushing the dirt from Sophia's dress with motherly care. As they walked away from the mansion's echo, the whispers of neighbors followed. Some mocked, others pitied. But Sophia no longer listened. For the first time that day, she felt a thread of mercy wrapping around her shattered soul. Still, her heart beat with fear. What will become of me now? Where do I go from here? Harriet led her down the narrow lane toward a modest little house with peeling paint and a small porch light flickering faintly in the dusk. And though Sophia did not yet know it, inside that humble home she would meet voices of wisdom, people who would remind her that her worth was far greater than the world's laughter. The night would not end in silence. Inside Harriet's home, Sophia was about to hear words that would begin reshaping her destiny, and one phone call to her sister would cut even deeper than Daniel's cruelty. Sophia jolted awake in the middle of the night, her chest pounding. She sat upright on a small cot inside Harriet Cole's modest home. Sweat rolled down her temple as Daniel's voice echoed in her mind. "You're worthless, Sophia. Leave this house and never return." Her trembling hands clutched the blanket as though it could shield her from the memory. The room was quiet but unfamiliar. Wooden walls lined with faded family photos. A single lamp glowing in the corner. Harriet had given up her own bed for Sophia and slept on a chair nearby, her eyes still watchful, even in half-sleep. When Sophia gasped, Harriet rose gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Easy, child. Bad dreams can't break you," Harriet said softly. Sophia's lips quivered. "It wasn't a dream. He really threw me out. My own husband. My own blood." Her voice cracked as she buried her face in her palms. Before Harriet could respond, the door creaked open. A young woman stepped in, carrying a stack of law textbooks. She was Naomi Blake, Harriet's niece, a 24-year-old law intern with bright, curious eyes and a gentle smile. She had come straight from her night studies, but when she saw Sophia's swollen face, her expression softened with instant compassion. "Is this her?" Naomi whispered to Harriet. "Yes," Harriet nodded. "Sophia Carter. She needs strength tonight." Naomi set down her books and knelt beside Sophia. "You don't know me yet, but I'm Naomi. You're not alone anymore. You hear me? Not anymore." Her voice was warm, steady, like the voice of a younger sister Sophia never had. Sophia's tears spilled fresh, but this time not from humiliation, from the shock of kindness. She whispered, Why are you helping me?" Naomi smiled faintly. "Because I know what betrayal looks like, and I know what survival can become." As dawn broke, another figure joined them at the table. Mr. Harold Bennett, Harriet's old friend and neighbor. A retired banker in his 70s, Harold carried himself with quiet dignity, his gray suit worn, but neat. He poured tea with steady hands and looked directly at Sophia. "I've watched families rise and fall," he said. "Listen to me, young lady. Your worth is not tied to a job, not to money, and certainly not to the pride of a man who cannot see your value. You are more than this storm. Sophia wiped her face slowly, his words echoing in her heart. For the first time since the humiliation at the gate, she felt a flicker of hope. But that flicker dimmed when her phone buzzed. The screen showed Evelyn, her sister. With shaking fingers, Sophia answered, hoping for comfort. "Evelyn," she whispered. Her sister's voice was cold. "Stop whining, Sophia. You brought this on yourself. A wife's duty is to endure her marriage, no matter the shame. Don't call me again." The line went dead. Sophia's body froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. Even blood had turned against her. Naomi clenched her fists. "She doesn't deserve you. Let her words die where they belong, in the past." Harold leaned closer, his voice low. "Remember this moment. Sophia, pain can bury you, or it can plant you." Sophia's heart quivered. She whispered, "But what if I don't have the strength?" Harriet placed her wrinkled hand over Sophia's. "You do, child, and soon you'll see why." That same week, a knock would sound on Harriet's door, and with it, a sealed envelope that carried a fortune, a name, and a destiny Sophia never imagined. The knock on Harriet's door shook the small house like thunder. Sophia jumped, her heart racing. For a moment she thought Daniel had come to drag her back, only to humiliate her again. Harriet rose from her chair cautiously, opening the door to reveal a tall woman in a dark suit, carrying a heavy leather briefcase. Her eyes were sharp but kind, her posture confident. Every movement steady with authority. "I'm looking for Mrs. Sophia Carter," the woman said firmly. Sophia hesitated, her hands clutching her worn dress. I'm Sophia." The woman stepped inside, setting her briefcase gently on the table. "My name is Rachel Evans. I'm an attorney. I was entrusted with a sealed will by your late aunt, Lydia Brooks. You were her chosen heir." The room froze. Naomi's eyes widened. Harriet covered her mouth in shock. Sophia felt the air rush from her lungs. "Aunt Lydia," she whispered, trembling. "But she wanted nothing to do with me. She cut ties years ago. Why would she leave me anything?" Rachel opened the briefcase and carefully laid a thick, sealed envelope on the table. Her voice softened, though her words carried weight. "Your Aunt Lydia may have been distant, but she watched you from afar. She saw your devotion, your endurance, your loyalty to a husband and family who never honored you. This is her final gift, and her way of rewriting your story." Sophia's fingers trembled as she reached for the envelope. She tore it open slowly. Inside was a letter written in Lydia's elegant handwriting, and below it, official documents. Her eyes scanned the words, her lips trembling as she read aloud. "To my niece, Sophia Carter. I know I was not present in your life, but I have watched from a distance. You gave love where none was returned. You worked yourself into exhaustion, yet no one saw your worth. I leave you the sum of $200 million under strict protection that it may never fall into the wrong hands. Rise, my child. Become the woman they said you could never be." Sophia's hands shook violently. The paper nearly slipped from her fingers. She stared at Rachel, stunned. $200 million. Rachel nodded firmly. "It is real, and it is yours. But hear me clearly. It comes with strict conditions. It is protected in a way that no one, not your husband, not his mother, not his mistress, can touch it. The law shields you now." Tears blurred Sophia's eyes. Her mind swirled with memories. Daniel's cruel words, Margaret's sneers, Vanessa's smirk, Evelyn's betrayal. For the first time, their voices did not crush her. For the first time, she saw a door opening. Naomi clutched Sophia's hand. "Do you hear that? You're free. You're not what they said you were." Sophia covered her face, sobbing, not from shame this time, but from relief. All these years, and she was watching. She believed in me when no one else did. Harold Bennett leaned forward, his voice deep and steady. "Remember, Sophia, this is not just money. This is power, and power must be used with wisdom. You must guard it, for the snakes around you will try to steal it the moment they smell it." Sophia lowered the letter slowly, her hands still trembling. She whispered through her tears, "After all this, I will rise. But Rachel's warning lingered like thunder in the distance. Daniel and his family must never know. And soon the danger of that secret would test Sophia's strength in ways she could not yet imagine. Rachel Evans' voice sliced through the quiet of Harriet's modest home like a blade. We must act fast. If Daniel Carter or his mother suspects even a whisper of this inheritance, they will circle you like wolves. The fortune is real, but it is fragile until it's sealed in protection. Sophia's breath caught. Her fingers clutched the will, her heart pounding. But how can we hide something this big? Rachel snapped open her briefcase, pulling out contracts, trust agreements, and bank authorizations. Her every movement was swift, deliberate, and precise. Leave that to me. By law, your aunt locked this inheritance into my care as executor. Today, I will place it in a trust account that shields it from Daniel, Margaret, Vanessa, or anyone who dares come close. Naomi Blake, sitting nearby with wide eyes, whispered like a child watching history unfold. Sophia, this means you're untouchable. They can throw you out, call you names, but they'll never touch what's yours again. Harold Bennett nodded solemnly, leaning on his cane. The wolves will hunt harder when they smell loss. You must walk with silence, child. Power hidden is power safe. Sophia exhaled shakily, the weight of the paper in her hands, her aunt's words. The sealed promise of $200 million felt heavier than stone, yet at the same time, it carried a lightness that lifted her soul. I've been fired, humiliated, betrayed, she whispered, staring at the creases in her termination letter. Her tears blurred the ink, but she pressed it flat against the table as though vowing never to lose it. This letter marked me as worthless, but one day I'll frame it. One day it will remind me where I came from. Rachel's pen moved swiftly as she signed the last document. She looked Sophia straight in the eyes. It's done. Your inheritance is untouchable. No husband, no mistress, no bitter sister can pry it away. Silence settled. Sophia's body trembled as though the walls around her shame had finally cracked open. Naomi reached for her hand, her smile tender. You're free now. You can start again. And this time, you'll choose the path, not them. For a brief moment, Sophia closed her eyes. The images of Daniel's sneer, Margaret's applause, Vanessa's smirk, Evelyn's cold silence. They still burned. But for the first time, another image rose above them. Her Aunt Lydia's words, urging her to rise. Yet freedom carried fear. She whispered, what if they find out? Rachel's gaze sharpened. Then they will destroy you. So you must guard your secret until the time is right. Let them believe you are broken. Let them laugh. The day will come when their laughter turns into silence. Sophia's heart raced. Her hands tightened around the termination letter. And as the sun sank outside Harriet's small window, Sophia knew this night had changed everything. The next morning, Sophia would step into the world again, not as the jobless woman mocked at the mansion gate, but as a woman quietly preparing to rebuild her life from the ashes. The sound of laughter pierced Sophia's ears the moment she entered the crowded community center. Children ran past her, mothers huddled in corners chatting, and elders shuffled on wooden chairs. Yet amid the noise she heard it, a whisper slicing through the air. Isn't that Daniel Carter's wife? The one he threw out? Jobless. Shameful. Sophia froze at the doorway, her chest tightening. Every eye that turned her way seemed to carry judgment. Her palms grew damp as she clutched her worn handbag. Her body wanted to turn and flee, to hide forever. But Naomi Blake stepped forward quickly, looping her arm through Sophia's. Don't mind them. They only know one part of your story. You're not here to impress them. You're here to stand again. Sophia swallowed hard, nodding faintly. Together they walked toward a corner where Harriet sat arranging supplies for the day. Harriet looked up and smiled warmly. Ah, there she is. Come, child. You have hands made for more than tears. Let them see it. The first hours were a storm inside her. Some volunteers whispered behind her back, pity mixed with scorn. Yet when Sophia quietly began helping children with their reading, her trembling hands steadied. Their small smiles and trust felt like balm on her bruised heart. Harold Bennett, the retired banker, appeared later in the afternoon carrying a stack of old books. He leaned on his cane, and watched her for a moment before speaking. Do you see, Sophia? Dignity doesn't begin with wealth. It begins with giving. These small steps, they are stronger than you think. Sophia looked down at the little girl holding her hand, eyes wide as she struggled to pronounce words. A warmth bloomed in her chest. For the first time since being dragged to the mansion gate, she felt something other than shame. She felt needed. Naomi squeezed her shoulder. I told you, you're not broken. You're rebuilding. As the day ended, Sophia walked out of the center with Harriet, Naomi, and Harold beside her. The whispers still followed. She's the one Daniel abandoned. But this time, Sophia's steps were steadier. She whispered under her breath, one day I will stand again, not in shame, but in strength. That night, back at Harriet's home, Sophia placed the crumpled termination letter carefully into her bag. She traced the torn edges, her voice low but firm. You marked me as worthless, but soon you will be my crown. Harold overheard her words and smiled faintly, though his eyes carried caution. Keep your strength quiet for now. A hidden flame grows hotter than one exposed. Sophia nodded, though deep inside a fire had already been lit. While Sophia was quietly rediscovering dignity in the community center, far away at the Carter mansion, Daniel was laughing with Vanessa on his arm, ready to flaunt his new life without Sophia. The chandeliers blazed above the Carter mansion as laughter echoed through the grand hall. Daniel Carter walked in proudly, his arm locked tightly around Vanessa Moore's waist. She shimmered in a red silk gown, leaning into him as though she had always belonged there. Gasps rippled across the guests. Some whispered shock at how quickly Sophia had been discarded. Others whispered admiration for Vanessa's sudden rise. Daniel smirked, lifting a glass of wine high. Gentlemen, meet the woman who makes me stronger than ever. Sophia was dead weight. This, he squeezed Vanessa's side, this is the wife I should have had all along. The crowd erupted in claps and false laughter. Margaret Carter, seated like a queen on her velvet chair, clapped harder than anyone else. Her voice rang sharp across the room. At last, my son has chosen wisely. No more shame dragging our name into the dirt. Daniel's chest swelled with pride. Every nod, every cheer, fed his arrogance. He threw his head back and laughed as Vanessa kissed his cheek dramatically for all to see. Yet not all faces in the room glowed with delight. From the far corner, a man in a dark tailored suit observed quietly, his eyes calculating. Victor Kane, a longtime rival in business, swirled his drink slowly, watching Daniel's arrogance unfold like a play. He whispered to the man beside him, the higher a man climbs, the easier it is to push him. Meanwhile, Edward Miles, Daniel's long-standing business partner, stepped forward, patting him on the back. Daniel, this is bold. Cutting Sophia loose was the best decision you ever made. With Vanessa here, your future is secured. Daniel grinned proudly. Edward, my empire is only getting bigger. Sophia couldn't keep up. Vanessa understands ambition. Vanessa's lips curved into a smile, but deep inside, her thoughts drifted elsewhere. She wasn't content with being shown off like a trophy. She wanted more wealth, more power, more recognition. And though she leaned into Daniel's arm, her eyes briefly met Victor Kane's across the room. He held her gaze just long enough to plant a dangerous seed. The guests cheered again as Daniel raised his glass. To new beginnings, to the Carter name rising higher than ever. But beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. Edward's loyalty was shallow, tied only to profit. Victor's silence was heavy with strategy, and Vanessa's hunger stretched further than Daniel could imagine. Margaret leaned close to Daniel, whispering in his ear, never look back at Sophia. She was a curse. Vanessa will bring you fortune. Daniel nodded, basking in his mother's approval. For a moment, it seemed Daniel had truly won. He had thrown Sophia out, replaced her with Vanessa, and earned applause. But in the shadows of that grand hall, Victor Kane's eyes narrowed, his lips curving into the faintest smile. What Daniel didn't see was that Vanessa's greed and Victor's cunning would soon intertwine. And the empire he bragged about tonight would become the very empire stripped from his hands. The crystal glass shattered against the hotel floor as Vanessa Moore slammed it down in anger. I will not be treated like a decoration, she hissed, pacing across the private suite. Daniel flaunts me in public, yes, but he keeps the real power to himself. I did not crawl into this position just to smile and pour wine. Across from her sat Clara Young, Vanessa's longtime confidant, a woman with sharp eyes and a tongue as smooth as silk. Clara leaned back lazily, twirling her earring. Then stop playing the dutiful mistress, Vanessa. Men like Daniel only understand leverage. If you want more, you take it. Vanessa paused, her chest rising and falling. Clara's words slipped into her mind like venom. Take it. The door clicked open, and Victor Kane stepped in, his tailored suit perfectly pressed, his expression calm but dangerous. He had been listening long enough to know exactly what Vanessa craved. You want more than his arm, Victor said smoothly. You want his empire. Vanessa's eyes flickered. And if I do, Victor's lips curved. Then you play on his weaknesses. He trusts the wrong men. His pride blinds him. And you already have his ear. Whisper the right words and soon his crown will fall into your hands. Clara leaned forward eagerly. Do you see, Vanessa? This is what you were born for. Forget Sophia. That little fool never knew her worth. You could become everything she wasn't. At the mention of Sophia, Vanessa's jaw tightened. For a moment, a flicker of guilt surfaced. Memories of her childhood friend, of braiding her hair, of standing beside her at her wedding. But the flicker vanished as quickly as it came. Greed drowned guilt like waves over sand. Tell me what to do, Vanessa whispered. Before Victor could answer, another figure entered the suite. Anthony Ward, a wealthy investor known for his ruthless taste for women and business alike. He was older, draped in luxury, his gold watch gleaming under the light. Vanessa, Anthony purred, kissing her hand. Victor tells me you have ambition. I like ambition. A woman with fire deserves more than scraps from Daniel Carter's table. Stick with me, and I'll show you what true wealth tastes like. Vanessa's breath caught. The temptation was heavy, intoxicating. For the first time, she saw a path beyond Daniel, beyond his mansion, beyond the Carter name. A path where she could hold power in her own hands. Clara whispered in her ear, Take the offer. Power does not wait for permission. Vanessa closed her eyes, imagining the life Sophia never had, the life she wanted to claim. When she opened them again, her voice was steady, sharp. Tell me everything. Victor's smile widened, and Anthony's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Clara clasped her friend's hand, sealing the pact with unspoken betrayal. That night, as Vanessa plotted with Victor and Anthony, Daniel laughed in ignorance at the mansion. He had no idea the woman he flaunted as his prize was already sharpening the blade that would cut his empire apart. The front door of Harriet's modest home slammed open so hard the hinges rattled. Daniel Carter stepped inside without knocking, his expensive shoes thudding against the worn wooden floor. His sharp suit clung to his frame, his cologne filling the air like poison. He plastered on a smile that fooled no one. Well, well, he drawled, his voice dripping false concern. Look at you, Sophia, hiding in this little shack. I thought I should come check on you. After all, I'm not a monster. You were my wife once. Sophia stiffened, her heart racing. The memory of being dragged to the mansion gate, of his voice shouting, You're worthless, came flooding back. She clutched the termination letter in her pocket, the paper crinkling like a shield. Harriet Cole rose from her chair, her eyes sharp with warning. This is not your house, Daniel. You barge in here without respect. Naomi Blake, sitting at the table with her law books, slammed them shut and stood. Her young face blazed with anger. You don't belong here. You made it clear when you threw her out. Why pretend now? Daniel ignored them both, his gaze fixed on Sophia. He tilted his head, feigning softness. Sophia, I just came to see how you're surviving. It can't be easy. Losing a job, losing your home. I wanted to make sure you're not doing anything foolish. You know I still care, in my way. His words dripped with manipulation, but his eyes betrayed him. He wasn't here out of care. He was here to measure her, to make sure the woman he abandoned wasn't finding a way to rise without him. Sophia's lips trembled. For a moment, she almost slipped into old habits, almost whispered, Thank you for coming. But then she remembered Harriet's steady hand, Naomi's sisterly encouragement, Harold's wisdom, and her Aunt Lydia's words. "Rise, my child." She straightened her back, meeting his gaze with steady eyes. "You chose your path, Daniel. You didn't come here for me. You came for yourself." Daniel's smirk faltered. His pride bristled. "Careful, Sophia. Without me, you're nothing." Naomi stepped forward like a shield. "No, Mr. Carter. Without her, you're blind." Harriet's voice, calm but iron, added, "Leave her in peace. The day will come when your arrogance will choke you." Daniel's fist tightened at his side, but he forced another false smile. "Very well. Play strong. But remember this, I always win." He turned sharply, slamming the door behind him. Sophia sank into her chair, her breath trembling. For the first time, she hadn't bowed to him. Her heart whispered, "I am not the same woman you threw away." But in the shadows of the Carter mansion that same night, Evelyn whispered into Margaret's ear, "Sophia is plotting something. I can feel it." Margaret's eyes narrowed, her cold smile returning. Daniel left Harriet's home with anger boiling. But what he didn't know was that auditors were already digging into his empire, and soon his secrets would no longer stay hidden. "Stop! Look at this!" Stephen Grant's voice thundered across the dimly lit office as he slapped a file down on the desk. Stephen, a seasoned forensic auditor in his 40s, with sharp glasses and a sharper instinct, stared at the numbers glowing on his laptop screen. His eyes narrowed. Daniel Carter has been cooking the books for years. Mia Foster, the eager young intern barely out of law school, leaned over his shoulder, her brown eyes wide with excitement and fear. "You're right. Look, the dates don't match. Funds were moved into shell accounts just days before Sophia Carter was thrown out. He's been siphoning money." Stephen's jaw clenched. "This isn't sloppy accounting. This is deliberate fraud." Stacks of contracts, receipts, and transaction slips lay scattered across the desk. Every page screamed corruption, and as the evidence piled higher, so did the storm about to break over Daniel Carter's empire. In a quiet corner of the city, Rachel Evans, Sophia's lawyer and executor of Aunt Lydia's will, sat calmly on the phone. Her voice was low, careful, but her words precise. "Yes, Mr. Grant, you'll find more if you dig deeper into the offshore accounts. Leave Sophia's name out of it for now. Protect her. She's endured enough humiliation." Stephen adjusted his glasses, his mind racing. "This man has built his house on sand. When this goes public, it will bury him." Mia, her hands shaking as she typed notes, whispered, "Do you think his wife knows? Sophia, she lost everything. Maybe she was the first victim." Rachel's voice, steady through the line, carried iron beneath silk. "She knows more pain than you can imagine. And when this is over, the world will know the truth, that she was never the problem." "He was." Stephen flipped another page, his pulse quickening. Each transaction was another nail in Daniel's coffin. "This is enough to put him behind bars." Mia's face lit with a mix of awe and determination. "Then let's finish this. Sophia deserves justice." For a moment, silence filled the room. In that silence, Rachel sat back in her chair, her thoughts turning to Sophia's trembling hands clutching the termination letter. She knew that behind Sophia's quiet rebuilding was a strength ready to burst forth. "Hold on, child," she whispered to herself. "Your time is coming." But in Daniel's mansion, the arrogance remained. He laughed with Edward Miles, toasted wine with Vanessa, and sneered at Victor Kane, blind to the storm gathering against him. Stephen closed the file firmly. "We've got him. It's just a matter of time before the courts see this." Mia's voice was hushed, but her words carried weight. "And when they do, Daniel Carter will fall." What Stephen and Mia didn't know was that Daniel's fall would not come quietly. It would explode in betrayal, humiliation, and collapse that would shake his empire to the ground. The boardroom erupted in chaos. "Your contracts are gone, Carter!" Victor Kane's voice cracked like a whip as he slammed the file onto the table. "Every deal you thought was secure now belongs to me." Daniel's eyes widened in disbelief. "What nonsense is this?" he barked, standing so abruptly his chair crashed to the floor. But Victor only smiled, calm as a predator that had waited for the kill. "It's called strategy. While you paraded your mistress like a prize, I bought out your partners. Edward Miles was the first to sell his loyalty, and the rest followed. Daniel's gaze snapped to Edward, his longtime partner, who sat pale but defiant. Edward shrugged. Business is business, Daniel. Victor offered me stability. You offered me chaos. I chose wisely. Daniel's hands shook. His empire, the one he mocked Sophia for not being worthy of, was crumbling in front of him. And then came the heavier blow. A court clerk rushed into the room with papers. By order of Judge Caroline Holt, all Carter assets are frozen pending investigation of fraud and embezzlement. Gas rippled. Daniel snatched the papers, his face flushing. Frozen? This is impossible. But in the shadows of the boardroom, Detective Marcus Scott stepped forward, badge flashing. Not impossible, Mr. Carter. Justice. We've been watching. Every shell account, every stolen cent. It ends now. Daniel staggered, his chest tightening. He looked to his mother, Margaret, who had accompanied him proudly, but even her face paled, her lips trembling. Daniel, what have you done? He turned desperately to Vanessa, clinging to the illusion of her devotion. But Vanessa's hand slipped from his arm. Her red dress swayed as she stepped back, her eyes already drawn to Anthony Ward, who stood at the doorway waiting. Vanessa, Daniel's voice cracked. She smiled coldly, tilting her chin. You're finished, Daniel. Why should I sink with you when Anthony can give me the world? Anthony's arm slid around her with ease, his voice mocking. A man with nothing is nothing, Vanessa. Come with me. The betrayal cut Daniel deeper than any court order. He fell to his knees as Vanessa walked away without a glance back. At the gala later that night, the humiliation worsened. Gloria Daniels, a rival socialite, sneered at Vanessa, her voice slicing. So you left Daniel for Anthony? Pathetic. You're nothing more than a hand-me-down chasing scraps. Laughter followed Vanessa as Anthony discarded her soon after, leaving her abandoned and mocked. And while Daniel's world collapsed, another dagger twisted. Evelyn Carter, Sophia's sister, was exposed as having fed Margaret lies and whispered poison against Sophia from the beginning. When confronted, Evelyn shrugged. I only sided with power. Sophia was weak, but power was gone, and with it, Evelyn's mask crumbled. Daniel, once arrogant and untouchable, now sat in his office with his head in his hands. Contracts gone, wealth frozen, mistress gone, even family beginning to scatter. He whispered in broken desperation, Sophia. What Daniel did not know was that soon he would kneel before the same woman he had thrown out. But she would no longer be the same broken wife. She would be the woman standing tall with power he could not touch. The same gates that once threw her out now shook with desperate pounding. Sophia! Sophia, please! Open the door! Daniel's voice cracked like shattered glass, echoing into the night. His once polished suit was wrinkled, his tie loose, his hair wild. His eyes, hollow from sleepless nights, begged where once they had mocked. Inside Harriet's modest home, Sophia sat quietly, holding the framed termination letter. Once her mark of shame, now her symbol of strength. Harriet peeked through the curtain, her voice low but steady. It's him. The man who humiliated you now crawls at your door. Naomi's fist clenched at her sides, fury burning in her young eyes. He has no right to come back. After what he did, he dares to beg? Rachel Evans, the lawyer who had shielded Sophia's inheritance, placed a firm hand on Naomi's shoulder. Her voice was calm, but every word carried steel. Patience. This moment belongs to Sophia. Only she can choose how it ends. The pounding grew heavier. Sophia, I was blind. Vanessa betrayed me. Victor destroyed me. My mother disgraced me. Everything is gone. Please or forgive me. Take me back. We can start over. Sophia rose slowly, her heart racing, but her steps steady. She opened the door. The sight of Daniel on his knees beneath the streetlight nearly broke her. Once a man of arrogance, now reduced to a beggar in the dirt. Silence stretched. Daniel crawled forward, his hands trembling as they clutched at her dress. You're still my wife. You always will be. Save me, Sophia. Please. Tears stung her eyes, but her voice was no longer weak. It carried the weight of dignity. The day you threw me out for losing a job was the day you stopped being my husband. You chose humiliation over devotion. Now you reap what you sowed. Daniel's face twisted with despair. I was a fool. Greed blinded me. Give me another chance. Behind Sophia, Stephen Grant, the forensic auditor, stepped into the doorway. His calm voice cut through Daniel's cries. You don't need a wife's forgiveness, Daniel Carter. You need a judge's mercy, and that you will not find here. From the street, neighbors gathered, whispers racing like fire. Is that Daniel Carter, begging, to the wife he abandoned? The same community that once mocked Sophia now watched with awe, their cheers rising for her, not him. Harriet's voice carried from behind her. Stand tall, child. This is the hour you were meant for. Sophia lifted her chin, her tears drying. She looked at Daniel with grace, not bitterness. I forgive you, Daniel, but I will never return to you. My life is no longer yours to claim. His grip fell away. His body shook as he collapsed fully to the ground, broken in spirit. The crowd gasped at the finality of her words. Sophia turned back into the house, her steps firm. The framed letter in her hand caught the lamplight. No longer a scar, but a crown. She had risen. The neighbors erupted in cheers, voices echoing through the street. Sophia, once mocked as jobless, now stood as a woman of power and dignity. But Rachel's voice lingered like a quiet warning. This chapter is over, Sophia, but the world is still watching. What you do with your inheritance will decide the legacy you leave. And thus, though Daniel lay defeated, the weight of her next choice still hung in the air. The sirens shattered the night as flashing red lights cut across the mansion's stone walls. Daniel Carter! Detective Marcus Scott's voice thundered as officers poured through the gates. The community swarmed outside, their whispers swelling like a tide. Daniel, still on his knees from Sophia's refusal, lifted his head in horror. Marcus stepped forward, his badge gleaming. You are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and corruption. Cold steel cuffs snapped around Daniel's wrists. He struggled, his voice desperate. Wait, I'm Daniel Carter. You can't do this to me. But Marcus's grip was iron. You're not untouchable anymore. Justice doesn't care about your name. The crowd gasped, some jeering, others silent in shock. Margaret staggered forward, tears streaking her face. Please, my son can't go to prison. He was misled. But the officers pulled Daniel to his feet without pity. Vanessa, who once stood proudly at his side, hid in the shadows with Anthony Ward nowhere near her. Discarded and mocked, she lowered her head as neighbors whispered, She thought she won. Now look at her. Inside the courthouse, days later, Judge Caroline Holt presided with steady authority. Her voice rang across the chamber as she read the verdict. Daniel Carter, your empire was built on lies and greed. Today, those lies end. Your assets are seized, your power stripped. You will serve the sentence this court delivers, not as a man above the law, but as a criminal beneath it. Daniel's shoulders slumped as the gavel cracked. The echo was final. At the back of the courtroom, Evelyn stood pale, shame burning her cheeks. Whispers swirled around her. She betrayed her own sister. And for what? Margaret, once proud, now bowed her head in silence, her power gone. And there in the front row, Sophia Carter stood tall. No longer the trembling woman clutching a termination letter, but a leader with unshakable dignity. Harriet smiled warmly from her side, Naomi's proud tears glistened, and Harold leaned on his cane, nodding as though to say, You made it. Sophia stepped outside into the sunlight, reporters pressing forward, cameras flashing. She lifted her hand to quiet the crowd. Her voice carried not bitterness, but strength. I was thrown out for losing a job, mocked as worthless. Today I rise not in vengeance, but in purpose. With this inheritance, I will build a foundation that gives hope to the broken. So no woman, no man, no child will ever feel the shame I once carried. The community erupted in cheers, voices echoing through the square. The same neighbors who once gossiped now clapped, celebrating her as a symbol of resilience. As Sophia walked away, the framed termination letter tucked beneath her arm, it caught the light of the afternoon sun. No longer a scar of humiliation, it gleamed as the crown of her victory. Daniel, handcuffed and dragged into a waiting van, watched her go with hollow eyes. His empire had fallen, his mistress gone, his pride crushed. But Sophia's name now soared higher than his ever did. Though Daniel's chapter had closed in disgrace, Sophia's new story was only beginning. A story of legacy, power, and grace that would echo long after the pain was gone.